So, in today's video I'm going to be reading the winners of the Goodreads Choice Award in 2024, and I'm going to be reading all the genres. Besides the books that I've already read in specific genres, which is only the romance and the young adult fantasy, but I have 12 books to get through in this video. And I looked through all the books, and there are certain books. Okay, I'll be honest, I'm not happy about any of them because some of them I have never heard about. I don't like reading non-fiction or like memoirs and biography books. And I saw that the romantasy book is House of Flame and Shadow, which I've been meaning to read this book for the longest time, but I also don't want to read this book at all because it's a pain. Like, it's so fat. 800 pages, and I heard people say that it's not that good. So I'm scared about that. But I am determined to get through these books, find out why they are the winner in 2024. I also question, how do books get onto these categories? Because I feel like it's sometimes like really... Okay, it's all random books. I just never read them because they're in other genres that I don't particularly read. But I wonder, how do they pick the books within these genres? And I feel like maybe it's because they're the most like read books, if that makes sense, or they're the most like reviewed, and then they just pick them and then people vote for who the winner is. But the first genre is fiction, and the first book is called The Wedding People. I don't know what this book is about, but the blurb is telling me that it's about a young woman who ends up crashing a wedding at a posh Rhode Island inn, and it's gonna be drama, which I love drama. I started reading The Wedding People, which I'm actually really enjoying, which is very unexpected because it is a lit fic, and with lit fic, my relationship with them is so complicated because I do end up hating them half of the time, and I kind of feel that with this book as well, but I'm also really loving it. I think the issue is that with the first 20 to 30% of the book, I genuinely felt so ill because of the, I guess, background context of the present timeline. It just made me feel so angry, and I cannot move past it. It's also the most simplest thing ever. The beginning of it was just so unexpected, and I'm really interested to see, I guess, her dynamic with these people who she is creating a relationship with. And I just think that Phoebe, a main character in general, is just so interesting to read about. And I started reading this book today, and I did end up reading like a good chunk. I'm surprised that I've already read 40% because I really took my time to sit down and read it. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, I need a break because this is too much for me to handle at once. And at this point, I already know where this book is gonna go. Like, I have a feeling that it may lead to a direction that I'm also not gonna be happy about. But you know what? I'm sat, I'm ready to read it, and I'm very excited. I think, you know what? We are starting off this video with a good book, because if I didn't like this book, the rest of this video, the mood would not be good. I finally finished reading The Wedding People, and you know what? I understand why it was the winner in the Goodreads Choice Award, because I don't like literary fiction, and I absolutely love this book. I devoured it. Honestly, I was very surprised about the fact that I started it and that I actually sat down and read it as quick as I possibly could. I think our main character Phoebe is just so interesting, and she basically comes to this hotel because she wants to die, which is why she ends up crashing this wedding. But there is this quote that is said at the end of the book that I think really kind of hits me in a way, and really, I guess, describes the relationship she has with the bride and the people that she met during this wedding, who she had no idea who they were before. And the quote is, "But it is also true that this wedding will never be a waste, because I came here to die, and now look at me. Leela, every day this week you gave me a reason to get up in the morning, to put on a beautiful dress and be part of something, and for that I will always be grateful." It was just really interesting to, I guess, read about each character, their flaws, and how the relationship develops with each other, especially because Phoebe, I thought she was such an empathetic character that really was kind to other people, despite them, in my opinion, being very annoying, and her also suffering with her own mental health. And I don't know, I just thought that this was such a beautiful but depressing story. The next book that I'm going to be reading is A Woman. This author also wrote The Nightingale, which I ended up DNFing because I didn't really like this book. I'm not the biggest fan of historical fiction, so in general they are really hard for me to get into, and overall I do tend to feel bored whenever I read them. But I just don't like reading historical fiction about wars because to me it's just very devastating, especially because I know what happens. So historical fiction mixed with something else I don't personally mind, but when it comes to reading books about war, it's off limits for me. So I don't really know what The Woman is about. Don't be surprised if I end up DNFing this book because, as I mentioned, this genre is just not really it for me, unfortunately. But we'll see, because you never know, I may end up loving it like I loved The Wedding People. I started reading The Woman and I'm glad to say that I actually really like it, so I'm going to proceed with it. I went into this book with caution and probably a bit of bias because, as I mentioned before, I DNF'd The Nightingale, so I really didn't know what to expect. But so far I am really enjoying it. I haven't read that much of it, but I do want to progress further into the book. It's basically about Frankie, who becomes a nurse in the Vietnam War, and so far it is at the beginning stages, and already at that point it's very emotional. So I know that as the book continues, more stuff is gonna happen, and I feel like over time more characters are gonna probably die. I'm probably gonna cry, and I am a bit apprehensive to continue with reading this book, but at the same time I am excited. I'm reading The Woman and I swear, like, literally all I'm doing is crying, just like sobbing tears. Like, I'm so close to finishing it. I'm like 89% through it and I'm just like crying. And it's like literally my nose is blocked, tears streaming down my face. It's like every single page I'm just like, I cannot read this. I feel so bad for Frances because literally everything in her life is going wrong, and I swear all the men in her life have failed her besides Henry. Look, I'm so close to finishing this, but I think for now I would take a break, finish this later tonight. Would never read this book again because the pain is like too much for me. Like, I literally have been crying, I think like halfway through the book, maybe like even, I think it's earlier than halfway. Once she came back from the war, like, ever since then, like, every single chapter, every single page, I've just been like crying. So I finally finished The Woman, and I think if you guys saw my last couple of clips where I'm literally sobbing my eyes out, I think you can understand what my thoughts on this book are. I really enjoyed it, and this is why I think historical fiction is so important, because even though you hear about war, you're taught about war, there's still a disconnect between something that you hear and something that you will actually experience. So I feel like with fictional books, it gives you a deeper perspective where you kind of place yourself in the characters' shoes and their experiences. So yeah, reading this book was very hard because we get to see Frankie go through grief and PTSD, and overall it made me cry so much. The only thing that I would say that I didn't really like about the book was how, even though it's called The Woman, I feel like in a way it is also somewhat centered around men, if that makes sense. Like, her whole romances, I think there were like 4 guys, none of them ended well, and it was just like all of it was a mess, and I was kind of like, did we really need the romance? I feel like in a way it is realistic, but I literally hated all the men in this book and just like the things that they did, and honestly I think we could have done without them. So the next book that I'm going to be reading is in the, I think, mystery and thriller section, and it's called The God of the Woods. Apparently it is about a teenager named Barbara Van Lark who vanished from her bunk at a summer camp. Oh my god, I actually love like mystery and thrillers that are set in summer camp. I don't know why. And then her older brother also disappeared the same way. Yeah, I actually really like mystery and thriller books. I think the important part is that they're not super slow or boring. I understand that mystery books have to kind of like build up that tension and that suspense, but it has to be done well, otherwise it just feels really slow. I've started reading The Gods of the Woods, and so far I don't really know how I feel about it. We basically get two point of views. We get Louise, who is the camp counselor, and Tracy, who is the bunkmate of the girl who disappears, and we kind of go, I guess, back and forth between the present timeline and the past timeline to get the context of the girl who disappears. And I honestly don't really know if I'm in the mood for this book, so that could be affecting my thoughts on it, but I'm gonna try and read a little bit more, see how the plot develops, and I will make my judgment based on that. Okay, let me tell you guys. Basically, I was reading The God of the Woods, and then I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go ahead to the ending, which I know I shouldn't do in a mystery thriller book, but I went ahead to the ending, read the whole revelation, and it didn't surprise me. It just made me feel very angry, I guess, and very sad for the children. But after that, I was like, you know what, yeah, I'm gonna go back to where it was at. I'm gonna keep reading the book. And then I was kind of like, actually, I don't want to read this book anymore. Like, I thought about picking it up, I thought about reading it, and I just didn't feel excited. And I think, you know, that's kind of a sign that I'm not gonna enjoy the book and that I'm basically going to be forcing myself to read it. I think even from the beginning, it's not even because I read ahead to the ending and I know the whole mystery. Sometimes that actually makes me want to read the book even more because I want to know how it gets to that point. But I feel like the thing that I didn't really like was the multiple point of views and the time skips. I am a hater, if I'm being honest. Like, I'm a hater of multiple point of views, especially when it feels so useless. In this book, we get 6 point of views. 6. And some of the characters only show up like once, and then we never get to see them again. Some of them genuinely feel so useless. Like, I do not need their point of view. And I feel like the most, I guess, interesting character was probably Alice, the mum. That's basically it. Like, that's basically the only character out of all 6 that I thought were interesting. And I don't know, the book was just kind of boring. Also, the time skips. I don't really mind the time skips that much, but I'm telling you, the multiple point of views, especially because the characters, like, I don't know why. I think Alice, as I mentioned before, was the most interesting because I felt like she had a lot of depth, and just like reading about her background and like her husband and everything. But the other characters, I was kind of like, oh, they feel so empty, if that makes sense. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but I just didn't really care about them. So in the end, I just decided, you know what, I don't want to force myself. I'm gonna put a stop to this book as of right now. Okay, so the next category is actually the romantasy category, and the book who won this category is House of Flame and Shadow. I'm not gonna read that book. If I am gonna read it, I'm gonna read it last in this video because I have been wanting to read this book for a while, but then just the thought of picking it up, it haunts me. Like, I don't know if I even want to read it because I've heard a lot of mixed reviews, but I think if I'm gonna read this book, I'm gonna pick it up last, because imagine I read this and my mood just like plummets. The rest of this video is gonna be so hard for me to finish. I don't know, I feel like it's starting off good. I loved the wedding people, I loved the woman, but then from this point forward, like, I don't know, I'm scared. But I've decided to go into the fantasy category, and the book that won was Somewhere Beyond the Sea. This is a sequel though to The House in the Cerulean Sea, which I've actually been wanting to read for a long time. So I'm just going to read the first book in replacement of this book, because obviously I can't read this book if I haven't read the first book. So I'm just going to read the first book for this video, and then we're going to proceed with the rest of the books in the different categories. So I have started reading The House in the Cerulean Sea. I've only read 4%, so I barely read anything, but I don't know why, it kind of reminds me of Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I finished reading The House in the Cerulean Sea and I absolutely loved it. There was just something about this book that was so nostalgic but heartwarming to read, and I would definitely define it as a cozy fantasy. But from the moment I started reading the book, I already knew I was gonna love it, and I basically just read the whole thing in one sitting. Like, it was such a cute book, and it was very interesting because our main character, Linus Baker, kind of lives in a very mundane life. He's very much a background character, but it's really interesting to see how his character changes and develops over time as he meets these children and create a relationship with them. And it was just so cute seeing the different personalities of each of the children in this island and how their, I guess, relationship with Linus kind of developed over time as they started to open up to him more because of his very true and honest character and how he was like very encouraging and kind towards them. So I just felt like there was something about this book that was so like comforting to read, and I am definitely gonna read the next book. I'm honestly like, I'm probably gonna read it after I finish this clip, but I don't know, something about this series, like I just want to read the next book. So, you know, in the end, I am gonna read the next book, but I don't think I'll talk about it in this video. The next book that I'm gonna be reading is in the sci-fi section, and it's The Ministry of Time, which I have heard so many things about this book. I've obviously heard of a lot of other booktubers who have talked about this book, so I'm very interested to read it. I think I kind of know what it's about, but hopefully I like this book, because the thing is, I've heard people talk about this book, and from what they are saying, I'm kind of like, is this my type of book? I don't know, but we obviously have to read it to find out. Well, I decided to DNF a Ministry of Time just because I think that it's boring. I feel like when a book has a lot of hype surrounding it, you have high expectations, and then when your high expectations is not met, it's really a letdown. Obviously, I didn't really know what to expect from this book. I did kind of have a faint idea of like the summary, but while reading it I was kind of like, oh, it's just really boring. Literally nothing is going on. It's kind of like a slice of life, to be honest. We are just getting the everyday kind of routine, and it makes sense because the time travel obviously is being introduced to this new world, so he has to learn about it and everything. But I don't know, it's just so boring. It just feels like nothing is going on, and I don't really know if it gets better or if it picks up later on. But as of right now, I just feel like it's not super interesting, and because of that I don't really want to push myself to read it. The next genre is the horror genre, and I'm going to be reading You Like It Darker by Stephen King, and this is my first Stephen King book that I am going to read, so I'm pretty excited because obviously you hear about his books. He is a legend when it comes to like horror and stuff like that. I've watched quite a lot of his movies which are based on his books obviously, but I've never actually read one of his books, so I'm excited to read this. It's going to be an introduction to his books and his world, and hopefully if I really enjoy this I will continue with reading his other books. When I first started You Like It Darker, I wasn't really sure if I was gonna like it, and now that I've read a little bit more of it, I still don't really know if I'm going to like it. I don't know, I just find it so boring, and I honestly think I'm just not in the mood. Like, I've been in a really big reading slump for a very long time, so I think I'm just, honestly I feel like I'm just gonna DNF it because I don't want to read it. And I think I'm just gonna end the video here because I've been filming this since January. It's March right now, and honestly I think it started off good. Like, I read a lot of great books in this video, which I'm really happy about, but I feel like going out of my comfort zone has actually put me into a slump in some sort of way. So I just feel like I cannot film this video anymore, especially because it's already so long and I've already read so many books in this video. So unfortunately there are some categories that I still have to read, but I just think that I cannot. Like, I tried my best and I'm happy with the books that I read. I'm happy that I enjoyed them, but yeah, unfortunately I have to end this video here because I feel like otherwise I'm gonna get into a slump, and I obviously do not want to do that. But thank you guys for watching this video. Please like, subscribe and all that jazz, and I will see you guys in another one.